Hey, this is Tim Cummins, and welcome back to another Story Tim, where I tell my favorite stories from my 50 years on the planet. This one is another story from Madagascar. This relates to one of the most different kind of cultural experiences that you had in Madagascar, and it was related to a tradition called Famadiana. Now, if you go to Madagascar, what you notice right offhand is all of the building structures. The buildings, all the things are basically made out of this kind of fired brick. So when you go down to the river, you'll see guys that are digging out this mud, and they put them in these like molds and stuff like that, and they'll put them into the fire and burn these things and make these bricks, and you can buy these bricks for next to nothing. So if you go and look at the houses, they're all made of these things. So if you have serious typhoons, which is another point you may not know, but here in North America, we call these big hurricanes, these pressures, hurricanes, but in the southern hemisphere, you call the same thing a hurricane, you call them a typhoon. So when a typhoon would hit the island, of course, you have an enormous flooding, and of course, these mud brick structures wouldn't be very strong, so they wouldn't last. So, but if you go to the graves and to the cemeteries are all built of stone. And it all relates to how the Malagasy people see eternity. Whereas this part here in life here, where you may be very poor and have a very difficult circumstances, that doesn't really have much significance. Where the real significance come is in the afterlife. And what you will see happen is, of course, traffic in Madagascar is never very good. It's all tiny roads, and we lived in Tana and Rivu. We just called Tana, and the traffic was always bad. It wasn't really designed, these roads, for a lot of cars. And you would get zebu carts, which is like what zebu normally what you think of as like water buffalo. These enormous horns coming out like this, and you get carts loaded down with trucks like this. Well, they're going to the same place as the buses and things, so you would get real slow traffic. In fact, it wasn't unusual for us to travel by bike. And I don't know, if you've ever read the book Dune, but you remember how they would get on top of the worms and the sandworms, and they would ride the sandworms. Well, I would do sort of a similar thing to buses, which I called worming, and thinking of Dune. But I would actually ride my bike down the hill, and then when you come up the hill, you would see the buses, and the buses were these old diesel things, that wouldn't go very fast. And I would actually ride up as fast as I could to grab a hold of the bus, and then I would grab a hold of the back ladder on these buses, and I would let the bus pull me up the hill. And as I would just up off the hill, then I'd like get away from the bus, and I'd shoot down the thing down on my bike. Not the smartest thing I ever did. The people on the bus are like cheering you on, like, yeah, but you obviously had to be careful. Now, these guys, when they're going up the hills, they're not going, but, about 20 miles an hour. So not real fast, but still, as I think back on it now, not the deepest thinkers I was ever thinking of, But anyway, but traffic would slow down like this, and a lot of it because of Famadiana. And what would happen is that you would have the people would go to the graveyards, and they would actually exhume the bodies. Usually it would be the eldest relative there. You'd see they would come out there, and they would have these bodies that they would carry. Normally it was just one body. They would carry the body on their shoulders, and it would all be like a big parade and stuff like this. Of course, traffic is stopped when you had something like that, because they would take up the whole place, and they would go to their place and to their party place and stuff, and they would have Famadiana, which is basically what would happen is the body was wrapped in a red cloth called a lambamena, and they would remove the lambamena, and they would put a fresh cloth on these things. And while they would have special people that were like witch doctor kind of people that actually could speak to the dead. And so they would go up there, and they would say, something like, well, grandmother, we're glad that you're here at our party today. And grandmother would say through this medium, yes, I'm glad that you're here. I was cold, and I was glad that you brought me out to give me another lambamena. And they said, well, grandmother, tell us, we've got, Fadi here is, Fidi is going to get married. Tell us, what do you think? Oh, yes, this is they're going to have a very happy life and many children, and make sure that you build it, so that the western windows are open all the time, so that our ancestor spirits can come to visit you. And they would say, well, tell us, grandmother, what about the business? Oh yes, business will be good. There will be some hard times too, but business will be strong. So thank you very much, grandmother, for your words of wisdom. So then they would wrap her all back up like, it's a dead body, man. Wrap her all back up. They would all trudge down in a big party celebration back to the, to the graves, put her back into the graves, and then seal the tomb with these big rocks. Now, I've seen a lot of strange things in my 50 years here on the planet, but I got to admit that Famadiana was one of the strangest ones, and that was another story, Tim.